Hello there, everybody. Sean Sheehan with Paul Brown here for the UFC 312 preview show over in Australia, going down on February 8th. Two title fights in the top two spots. The middleweight title is on the line as Ricky Duplessis rematches Sean Strickland, and Zhang Weili takes on the much hyped Tatiana Suarez. And then there's the rest of the card. Paul, how are you? What are the anticipation levels for this? Because I know for a lot of people, I think that the top fight, yes. I think the co-main event is flying a little bit under the radar. How are you feeling about it now, a couple of days out?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at the bigger picture of all the great cards. I mean, we've had some really good cards, some really big fights so far in 2025. And then when you you glance at your Twitter or your Instagram and you see this card coming up this weekend, it doesn't stack up in comparison in like when you're talking about like name value. But like you mentioned there, the top two fights I think are very, very good. I rewatched Dricus Duplessis and Sean Strickland from last year, and it kind of reminded me how fun of a fight that actually was, and it was pretty closely contested. And like you, I think that co-main event is an excellent fight. I think it really, really is. It's very, very interesting. So I'm dying to see those two fights. And then outside of that, there's not a lot of name value. But when you look at the card, there are a couple of fights that could be very interesting, particularly that heavyweight one that's slap bang in the middle of the main card is going to be probably fun for as long as it lasts. But yeah, I mean, outside of that, I mean, I won't lie, I haven't looked at a hell of a lot of the prelims, so it's not got as much depth as some of the cards we've had already this year, but there's definitely some stuff to get excited about.
Yeah, I think they do to Australia what we kind of have here in Ireland, where they with some of the past Bellator cards and stuff, that they give you a couple of good fights and then they stack it with local people, which is, the locals are probably happy with it. The non-locals maybe not utterly enamored to pay maybe $100 if you're over in the States. But anyway, let's talk about the main event, Dricus Duplessis, Sean Strickland. You said you watched it. I watched it the other day as well. The rewatch will be out on Patreon on Friday, I believe. And what I took from that fight, Paul, was it was, again, one, obviously very, very close. I went back and I looked at my score, and I had given it to Strickland at the time. Funnily enough, I actually spoke to Eric Nixick this week about the fight. I'll have that interview out in Sherdog this week, and I actually spoke to him right after the fight as well in private about like the judging and how close the fight was. And he was kind of saying like, what can we do? How can we get over the line? I thought he did everything perfectly. And speaking to him this week, he kind of said that's something we've been looking at. We've been looking at how can Sean fight more towards the judges than he has done before. And he also said, like, look what he did in the last minute of the fight. If he could do more of that throughout the fight, that'd be a big thing. And the last thing I'll put to you here, Paul, that he said to me was, he said, I don't know the words verbatim here, but he said basically the Dricus out kind of worked him, out dogged him, if you want to put it that way, in a lot of the exchanges and a lot of the big, I suppose, important moments of the fight. And that's something they need to change as well. With that said, Paul, what do you think about those specific changes? We'll get into maybe the first fight if you want to, but those specific changes coming into this one, when you hear that, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, what Dricus did was he allowed Strickland, or he kind of accepted the fact that he was going to eat jabs and things like that, those kind of linear shots from Strickland, in order, like, I'll accept that in order to land a few big shots myself. And he just kept walking forward into the flames, and it paid off for him in the end because he was landing the bigger strikes for me in rounds 2, 3, and 4. And that's what was, he was wearing it on his face. Especially, I think it was even after the first round, he had that big mouse under his left eye. Maybe it was at the end of the second, but he just accepted the chance at the reality that, look, this guy is just very good at filling that space between me and him with shots. I can't work my way around it. I'm going to have to go through it to get to him, and I'm going to get hit on the way in. But he had confidence that he probably has that bit more power. And Strickland sort of took a little while for me, took a little bit too long to make adjustments to that. And we saw it at the end of the fourth round where, Eric was calling for him to, it was just getting away from the sort of tactical, the details, the technical stuff, saying, look, grin and bear this, you've got to put him now on the back foot, because he allowed Dricus to wear him down and just kind of grind him a little bit through a large chunk of that fight. And and that was probably the difference in that one. So it's just a case, like you said, like he did late on, it was like, right, let's get into this firefight then. Don't try and just box pretty against this guy, because he is not going anywhere. You just got to keep you got to give him as good as he's given you. So he did a good job of that in the end. In the last round, he won that last round for me. But like you mentioned, it's the big shots, isn't it, that win the round. So it's landing more of those. I mean, Strickland does a great job landing his jabs, his teeps. They're great range finders. They fill the space. But in the current scoring criteria, you also need to need to land those really, really concussive blows. So maybe just being a bit more assertive on that front. We might see a bit more of him this weekend doing that.
100%, because I think there was bits and pieces of that in the first fight as well, because like those, as you mentioned, the kind of 3 and 4, but also into 5 kind of took on a different role, I suppose, because Dricus maybe thought he was ahead 3-1. So the fifth rounds sometimes are different, but I think 3 and 4 especially, there's a lot of changes in those 2 rounds where, you know, as you said, Strickland was, a lot of it was the jab, a lot of it was those linear shots, the straight, the jab with the 2 coming behind it. And Dricus was kind of picking that off a little bit with his combination work, which, as you mentioned as well, was like which was the harder shots. But when Strickland started showing the jab, waiting for the shot to come, and then throwing the 3, he had a lot of success doing that. Now Dricus adjusted to that, and Strickland adjusted back again. There was a very, you know, we look at that fight and maybe think, you know, it's a bit of a sloppy fight, but there was intricacies in that fight, if you watch it specifically for those sort of changes, that maybe them 2 lads haven't been given credit for. And I think coming into this fight, it's very, very interesting to see what way that works itself out. Like another thing I said, not to bring up the Eric Nixon thing again, but like I kind of said to him, like, is there going to be that many changes? Like, Dricus won the fight. There's a great argument that Sean could have won the fight. Like 1 or 2 punches differently, and it changes a whole lot. Do you really? And he said, no, like sometimes people can go overboard with change their analysis. You know, they had a good game plan, we had a good game plan, let's go. And I feel like we're going to see a very similar fight. Like, let's maybe have a look and see what adjustments could be made for both of them to win. Like for me, in the first fight, Dricus was able to get a few takedowns. If he can get a few more, you would say that will help him to win cleaner. You know, Strickland as well, I know it's a thing he's going to be looking at for his own takedowns, seeing if he can get Dricus to the ground. And, you know, that could be a big part of this fight as well. For Strickland, he is going to have to stop Dricus landing those combination punches. He is, like, whether it's he himself landing his own, whether it's sticking and moving more than just the sticking part of the jab, that's going to have to be sorted for him. And for Dricus, again, like, I think for Dricus, you kind of up what you did in the last fight. Keep going forward, keep landing those combinations, keep Strickland jabbing, like, allow him to jab. Most people are afraid of Strickland's jab. I think for Dricus, he is fine as long as Strickland is just jabbing. Now, those jabs can add up as well, as you kind of mentioned, and you know sometimes it can be a death by 1,000 cuts, and maybe that's what'll happen. You never know, and if you fight Strickland enough times, it probably will happen. But at the same time, Dricus will be happy enough if he sees the fight play out like that. And the last thing I would say to you, Paul, I think sometimes we look at a fight and it goes 5 rounds and both guys are really, really, really strong as it enters the 5th round and as it ends the 5th round. I think both of these lads are. As we've seen in recent fights, like, are lads going to be 100% again? Like, and when I say 100%, I mean, if you're not 100% healthy, it's very hard for some lads to have 100% cardio as well. Now, these 2 lads are generally very, very good, but I don't know if they aren't coming in completely healthy, plus they have to adjust something. Like, that slight adjustment can take a little bit out of you. A little bit of an injury can take a little bit out of you, where the game plan is going well for, 2, 3, 4 rounds. When it gets to the 5th, it could be a very, very different story. And as close as this fight is, it could be level going into that 5th as well. That's a couple of things I would look at coming in here. What do you could be the changes coming into this fight that win it for Strickland or win it for Duplessis, or vice versa? What could lose it for either of them?
I think a key for Strickland will be not to allow himself be put on the back foot like he was. He kind of accepted it a little bit for a large chunk of that fight. So when Duplessis started like walking forward and piling on, throwing those blitzes, those combinations, Strickland was kind of accepting the role of fighting off the back foot, and he got noticeably tired. Now, I've no idea whether it was the fact that he had to fight off the back foot for large chunks of those mid rounds, which in itself is really, really tiring. I heard Veronica Hardy make a great point about this during their breakdown I watched last week. And she was kind of pointing out that just, fighting du Plessis, it'd be like doing lots of rounds on the really heavy bag, and your arms get tired because just the way he's built, and he just seems to absorb punishment, and he's a big solid dude, and he just keeps coming. So you could see that Strickland, like there was I think it was round 4 in particular, his arms looked like they were dropping, they were getting very, very tired. He consciously came out with his hands at his chin in the 5th round and was firing his jab from his chin, which he hadn't been doing for most of the fight up to then, which he generally doesn't do. He generally has that Philly shell where his right hand will be up near his chin, but the left one will be in front of his belly. And when he throws the jab from there, show it to the camera there. For anyone who's listening on audio, I'm feigning a punch at the camera. But the fist comes up this way rather than rotate it over. And it's easier to split the guard. Now, the up jab from there, it comes up just off the peripheral vision, so it can catch people unawares. It's a little harder to defend, and like I said, it cuts through the center of the guard, different to kind of the type of jab that you throw from your chin that you have to turn over. So it has its pros and cons, but he consciously came out in the 5th, 2 hands at the chin, and thrown the I noticed it like big time, because it's not something he really does, so we might even see him do a bit more of that. It's possible. For du Plessis, I think we might see him invest in the body a little bit more, because the way Strickland defends, like if he does get caught going back, he kind of fights tall, as we know, but he kind of leans back to avoid those shots too, because they are big looping shots that du Plessis fires out, and we saw him have some success with shots to the body, and that can lead to the takedowns too when Strickland's defending that way. So you might see a little bit more of that, but like you mentioned, it was a very, very nip and tuck fight, and it was little adjustments, little details made the difference. When I watch Strickland, I do like watching him just because he looks a little bit different to a lot of people when he fights. When I watch du Plessis, I mean, we've all seen the memes where everyone jokes about how clunky and quirky and unorthodox he looks. But in reality, like, look at his last 3 wins. Robert Whittaker, Sean Strickland, Israel Adesanya. He's beaten all the best fighters out there. He's unbeaten in the UFC for a reason. Just because he's aesthetically not perfect doesn't mean he's not effective. And it's this is a really fascinating matchup. I'm really interested to see who changes things up and makes the difference this weekend.
100%. And I think Ian usually brings in like the trash talk kind of part of it and how may that work out. We kind of saw that the first time, and I don't think it played a big difference, and I don't think it'll play a big difference coming in here either, to be honest. I think this is going to be the fight it is, and that's that here. So I think that's it. Have anything else adding it? Because like I just think, again, we're going to get a very similar fight, but what I hope we have is a major adjustment, if that makes sense. Like I think like there's certain fights that happen, and rematches or trilogies or quadrilogies, whatever you want to call them, that someone does something so well or so intelligent that it takes it away from the other person. Now, in this fight, it could be something small to make it a 4-1 instead of a 3-2 or something like that. But I do you know what? I'm not sure what that could be. Maybe it could be a bit more wrestling, or maybe I'm not sure what it would be, but I would love to see that from this fight. But again, I think, the level of expectation coming into this fight is probably a little bit low. And I think that's a good thing, because I think it'll probably be a better fight than people make out. So looking forward to that. Let's talk about the co-main event. Zhang Weili against Tatiana Suarez. 10-0 Tatiana Suarez, but has been injured and out for so long. Her last fight was in 2023, and she did another fight in 2023, but 2019 before that. She 2 fights in 2018, 1 fight in 2017, 1 fight in 2016, 1 fight in 2014, and 2 in 2015. That's 11 years and 10 fights. Not easy to do, but the ability is there. There's no doubt about it. And she's gone in against Zhang Weili, one of the greatest female fighters of all time. Won her last 4 in a row, beating in Jacek, Esparza, Lemos, and Yan. But again, it's inactivity with her. Fought once in 24, once in 23, twice in 22. And then it's back to 21 before that, the couple of losses to Rose Namajunas. does that even the field up a little bit? The fact that they've kind of both been a little bit inactive, and the fact that I think Suarez was supposed to fight a couple of months ago. I actually don't think she got injured. They just pulled her from that fight so she'd actually come into this.
Who was that meant to be against?
That was, oh God, I can't remember who it was. Was it? Oh God, I can't remember. Was it Mackenzie Dern? Was it Mackenzie Dern? Maybe not. I can't remember. But what is that a benefit for her? For someone who's been out for so long to just be in the gym and training and getting a little bit more fit, and I'm sure the more you're in the gym and the more you're not getting injured, the more confidence you'll get. And confidence is exactly what you need coming into a fight with Zhang Weili, isn't it? When you have the skill set of Tatiana Suarez.
It was Virna Jandiroba. I just looked it up there. But that would have been a good fight. Virna Jandiroba is very good, and she's a very good grappler. So, yeah, it's weird. Like, just the inactivity thing, it makes analysis of the fight kind of tricky, doesn't it? Because we just don't know how much of a part it's going to play. And like you mentioned, Weili Zhang doesn't fight that frequently either. But I mean, we have seen her in there probably more frequently definitely over the last couple of years than her opponent. Suarez, like you said, 2 fights in almost 5 years. It's wild. But she is a problem. She's a problem regardless. And there's the thing I always love about these fights is there's question marks now. There's things we want to find out the answers to going into this fight. Obviously, her grappling ability is huge. She's been wrestling since she was like 3 years old, then progressed into jiu-jitsu, which brought her into MMA, and she's an exceptional grappler. But the size thing as well is really interesting to me. She's gargantuan for strawweight. Like, she looks really tall, big, but like in reality, she's 5'5". If she stood next to you or me, she'd look tiny. But when she stands next to someone like Zhang Weili or Jessica Andrade, she looks like an absolute giant, So that's interesting, and I like how she fights. It's not that she's just a wrestler; she uses her strikes very, very, very well to create opportunities to hit takedowns. Like, an example would be the Jessica Andrade fight. Now, Andrade is this fighter who's pretty much the same size as Weili, and what she was doing was she was letting fly with those big left kicks from southpaw, and then obviously Andrade can't circle to her right because she's going into the power side, so she's going the other way. And what Suarez would do is she'd be powering off those weapons, the jab, the big kicks, the teeps, and then just stepping back and creating a bit of space. And Andrade would get frustrated, come after her, throw a shot, and then she just drop and catch a single, because when you're in those opposing stances, the single leg is so close, it's right there. And we've seen how good she is at doing things like that. Once she catches that leg, even if she only catches it a little bit, she has such long limbs herself. She can then kind of just step over and kind of cinch up that lock she has on your body and kind of climb her way up your body. So she's going to cause problems for her opponent. I just think Weili just has so much quality that it'll be difficult for me to see where Suarez, or see a world where Suarez dominates her on the ground. I don't think, of all the fighters in that division, I think Weili is probably the best rounded fighter, and we've seen her in there with some really good grapplers before. And I mean, Carla Esparza, she was ready to create scrambles and get to the back every time Esparza took her down, and she eventually got to the back and strangled her. And I mean, she has the skill set now to put Suarez away this weekend, but nobody's done it yet. So it's definitely a fight I want to see and I want to find out. I think a few of you guys in the WhatsApp group picked Suarez to win this one by submission, but I'm not so sure. I'm putting my faith in Weili for this one, but fascinating fight.
It is very interesting. Like, the thing I love about Suarez is that she never gives up on her wrestling. Like that fight you mentioned against Jessica Andrade, there was one time she went for a single and she wasn't getting it. And she basically dipped down for an ankle pick, and as you said, stepped that leg over and just dragged her to the floor. I think the biggest issue she had in that fight, maybe you could say it was a touch of top level ring rust. In that, I know she had a fight just before that, if I'm not mistaken, but it was Montana De La Rosa, and a different level than Jessica Andrade. I think she was too quick, to go for a submission over the position. I think she just and if she adjusts that against Zhang Weili, it'll change a lot. It will change a lot of how this fight looks. Because if she goes for a submission, maybe she get it now. She submitted Jessica Andrade, and she submitted her by going for it too quickly nearly. So fair enough, it worked in the end. but I don't think you can do that against Zhang Weili. If you get that takedown, if you get on top, stay there. And when, all you need in that fight to win is 3 takedowns. Win 3 rounds, and that is it. That's the way she should be looking at it. Now, I wonder if she will look at it that way, because we speak an awful lot in many previous shows. I'm sure you don't, when you're speaking about it as well, like the adjustment to fight main events, the adjustment to fight 5 rounds, the adjustment to fight for a title. You have to adjust. Everyone adjusts. You'd be stupid if you didn't. I wonder, will she adjust in the way she fights on the ground? Now, the last fight, as you said, she struck for, like, she's engaged to Patchy Mix. She reminded me a little bit of Patchy Mix by the way she fought on the feet and then set up the takedown. He's an unbelievable grappler as well, more jiu-jitsu, I suppose, than the wrestling side of it. But she kind of was very, very, very slow on the outside to land her. Slow is the wrong word, but deliberate, I suppose, is the way to land her shots on the outside. And it was very good because she is so much bigger than a lot of these people and so tall, and she can use that long kick to keep that distance. And as you said, Paul, if they need to break the distance, well, welcome to my fucking world. And you don't want to come in here because I'm just going to take you down. That if she can do that, get the takedown, you would think that's the hardest part of it. If you think back through the years, all the best wrestlers, how are they going to win? Get the fucking fight to the ground. For Suarez, it's keeping the fight on the ground is going to be the issue for her, because I believe she can take her down. Do I think she can take her down every time? No, but I do believe she will try to take her down continuously, and she will take her down multiple times if the fight goes that long. But it's on the ground. That's the most important part of this fight, I think, for Suarez. For Zhang Weili, Paul, obviously keeping the fight on the feet is going to be an important part, or maybe getting on top on the ground, whatever it is, or getting out from the bottom. Tell us about the fight on the feet. You mentioned Suarez's striking, and I just briefly mentioned it there, but I was just recording the betting show before I came in here, and I think the point I made on that was, as good as Suarez is looking on the feet these days, and as good as she is fighting from lint, you're just asking for Zhang Weili to use her speed and her accuracy from that range to kind of pick you off a little bit if you decide to fight, or if you have to fight a long range against Zhang Weili, don't you? What are the intricacies of her game that I assume you think she's going to be able to win on the feet if the fight stays there? Tell the people how she does it.
She has a little bit of a speed advantage, definitely, on Suarez. I think getting past that range is going to be her biggest issue. She goes heavy on low calf kicks, but obviously that's, in opposing stances, that's not really going to be an option. I mean, you can kick the inside of the lead leg, but you really got to commit to that. You kind of got to overcommit to that kick, rather than when your opponent's in the same stance as you can kind of throw a calf kick with very little tell. But when you're trying to throw to the other leg and go all the way across, you really have to turn your hips over. So it's going to be difficult for her to maybe establish her range, because once you kind of get in close enough, I mean, Suarez has, like I mentioned, that big kick from her back leg. That's got, because her legs are very, very long is the big thing, so she has a very potent weapon there. But Weili is just very crisp, sharp, and she can crack hard. We've seen her stun girls before. You mentioned there about Suarez kind of possibly getting her down and keeping her on the ground. But what Suarez does brilliantly on the floor is she gives her opponents a little bit of room to try to get up. And then that's when she snatches up things. I mean, she's very good at snatching up that front headlock position and also getting on the back. I think it was Alexa Grasso. When she beat Alexa Grasso, she allowed her to get to her knees and just gave her a little bit, just took the weight off a fraction for like a split second, and allowed her to pop up to the feet. And before she was even fully extended up on her feet, Suarez was already wrapped around her neck from behind. So, she's that's how she creates her opportunities to finish fights. I'm just dying to see how it does look if the fight does hit some grappling exchanges, because, as I mentioned, Weili is brilliant at getting to the back herself. So there's we could be seeing some very, very fast scrambles here, and we're going to find out what she's made of if the fight does hit the ground. If she manages to submit someone like Tatiana Suarez, I mean, that's just a massive feather in her cap, and she's already considered, like you mentioned at the start, one of the best fighters in the world, or of all time, in women's MMA.
No doubt about it. It's a very, very interesting fight. It's probably, the realest challenger Zhang Weili has had in a long time, and it's, everyone's wanted to see Tatiana Suarez fight for that title for so many years. So the fact that she's getting it now. I think they made the right decision in the end to give her the fight here, and I'm looking forward to seeing it and seeing how it works out. Other than that, I don't think we have a massive breakdown for the undercard, to be honest. A couple of fights I'm looking forward to, and I'll throw it over to you then, Paul. Justin Tafa against Talashin Teixeira. Look, Tafa is what he is. He's going to come out and he's going to throw his hands. He's going to be a hard lad to knock out and a solid chin. Teixeira, if you watch his fight in the Contender Series, he fought a lad not too dissimilar to Tafa who's going to throw bombs at him. And he said, Grant, you want to throw bombs at me? I'm going to be taller, bigger, longer than you. I'm going to throw my straight shots and I'm going to knock you out. And that's exactly what he did. And that's what he's done in most of his fights that I've seen so far anyway. So look, Tafa is in with a chance because he carries so much weight behind those shots. Teixeira definitely does eat shots as well, so that's going to be an interesting heavyweight. It'll probably be a first round knockout, but if it isn't, God help us, we'll see what happens after that. The other one I'm looking forward to, Tom Nolan against Slava Claus. No, I described two of these in another show I did as a terrible matchup for each other. Tom Nolan is a good technical gangly type of fighter. Borishev is more of your athlete who is maybe not the most technical in the world. He'll cause Nolan problems and Nolan will cause him problems. And I'm honestly not sure which way it'll work out, to be honest. But, Kong Wang is coming back here as well after that loss she just had. Bruna Brazil is nearly a 4-1 underdog coming in here.
Really?
Yeah. So if Kong Wang does the same thing again here, that could be a lot of money made in this one. So what in the undercard is sticking out to you, Paul? Anything interesting for you?
Kevin Jusay, of course, he's the guy that beat Kiefer Crosby, isn't he? And he's looked pretty good for the most part in his UFC career so far. So he's fighting a Kiwi guy, Jonathan Miklev, who I don't know, but Jusay has looked decent. Looks like he's got some good potential there. Outside of that, on the undercard, not so much. We've got a couple of Chinese names, a couple of Australian names, so they're kind of just filling out the card a little. Alexandre Topuria is on there. The most padded record I think I've ever seen coming into the UFC, 5-1, and the combined record of his opponents, I think, I can't remember the exact numbers, but it's nothing too spectacular. It's definitely one of the weaker records coming into the UFC. But they're the notable names on the undercard, and then on the main card, the opener, Jake Matthews and Francisco Prado. I think Jake Matthews is just going to be too smart, too cute for this guy. Prado has a bit of power, but I think Matthews, it's his 21st UFC appearance, so I think he'll be able to just ride out a difficult first round and pick your man off. Jimmy Cruz, I think he's 1 draw and 3 defeats in his last 4. I was writing my preview out earlier today for Fighters Only, so I have all these numbers fresh in my head, but how he's still got a job, I don't know. His last win in the UFC was in 2020, so I think if he loses to Rodolfo Bellato this weekend, I mean, it's the curtains for him. And the heavyweight fight you mentioned is interesting. Teixeira is 7-0, and all of them were first round knockouts. Well, one was a first round submission, then 6 first round knockouts. And like you mentioned, he in the Contender Series fight, I watched that one, and he just walked forward and he ate shots as well. So Tafa will definitely have the chance to put him down. So it's going to be a case of just who lands cleaner first. Tafa his UFC record's 4-4. But all 4 of his wins were first round knockouts. So, like you mentioned, it's got to be a first round knockout, or else the two of them are going to look pretty lost, I think, once they get up off the stool for round 2. But the excitement for me, I think, is mostly for the top 2 fights, which is probably the same for every single MMA fan in the world. But I'm definitely more excited now, having actually gone back and watched some Tatiana Suarez fights and watched the Strickland Duplessis, the first fight. So plenty there to get the teeth into this weekend. We just not as much as we've become spoiled with lately.
Indeed, 100%. Paul, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. If you haven't already, please sign up, patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast. We'll have the rewatch out tomorrow. Q&A is out every week. Early access to the podcast every single week, and early access to this show as well, the audio feature of it. And you can get the audio of that only on the Severe MMA Patreon. So, get that over there from me, from Paul. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll see you all next time. Good luck.